Hello and welcome to this After Effects certification preparation series of videos. I'm Luisa Winters. In this video, I'd like to discuss Objective 4.6b, which is to use 3D space to modify composition elements. So this one is going to be a little bit longer because quite frankly, we're going to go a little bit beyond. All right, just a little bit. This is not going to be a proper lesson on 3D. Because I'm not going to cover everything. I couldn't. But it's going to go where it needs to go when it comes to 3D compositions. All right, let's go to After Effects. In After Effects, go ahead and open the composition named Use 3D blah, blah, blah. It's the very last composition. If you don't have the exercise files, that's okay. Create a new composition, a solid, text, and a spotlight. That's it. All right. So this is how this works. All right, so here we go. These layers are 3D because this switch is checked. All right, that makes the layer being able to be manipulated in 3D space. For example, if I create a new composition and I just type something, right, and I make that layer 3D, now, if I press P for position, I'm going to have X, Y, and Z, closer and farther away from the camera. Which camera? The one that is always looking at the composition. After Effects is always looking through a camera. You can add other cameras, of course, but by default, After Effects is looking through a camera. So if you press R for rotation, then you can change things like the X rotation, see it? X, Y, and of course Z, which is the rotation that we're familiar with. That has to do with the axis, right? So here with my trusty sticky note, right? X is side to side, so it would rotate like this, right? Y is up and down, so it would rotate like this. And of course, Z is closer to the camera, so it would rotate like this. Not bad, huh? Alrighty, so going back to the previous composition, we see that we have text, we have solid, and all three of them are in 3D. All right, we have a light. This light happens to be a spotlight. If we want to edit the light, we can do it in one of two ways. We can start expanding things here in the timeline, not a problem. You can do it in here, or simply double click the light and a new interface dialog opens up and you can modify it in here. Notice that we have things like the color. I can change the color to like a more sepia, the intensity. That's ridiculous, right? I can make it darker, I can make it brighter. The cone angle, the cone feather. See, it's like really harsh, soft. All right, I'm not gonna go through everything here because, you know, this will cast shadows. This will cast shadows, and this controls the shadow darkness. See it? Like no dark, very dark, and this controls the shadow diffusion. All right, so you can control a lot. I just canceled out of there. You can control a lot of the things, how the composition looks, simply by modifying the light. All right, so do this with me. Delete everything. In fact, no, undo that. Create a new composition. So Control N, call it 3D, and now create a solid. Let's use shortcuts. We've done this enough, right? We've been together for a while. Use the shortcut. Control Y, Command Y if you are on the Mac. And just for fun, I'm going to make mine white. All right? Make that layer 3D. Boom. There you go. Let's add 3 lights. 3 lights. Layer, new, light. Look at the shortcut. Control, Alt, Shift, L. All right, that one is harder to remember. Just go layer, new, light. There you go. And I'm going to make this light purely red. Red. Boom. Red. It's a red light. I'm going to move this layer to here. I'm going to duplicate the light. So I'm going to select the light, Control D, Command D if you're on the Mac. I'm going to move it here, and I'm going to double click it, and this light is going to be blue. And I mean purely blue, as in the value. As in the value for red, green, and blue is going to be 0, 0, 255, blue, blue. Look what happens. Oops, I'm going to move this. I'm going to change the light to here. I'm going to change this light to here. Do you see how it's moving simply by my clicking on the arrow that has the axis? Like if I zoom in, see how that one is X? I want you to notice the color that happens when I put both blue and red together. That is magenta. All right, that is magenta. All right, so I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to duplicate this light again. And this time I'm going to make this light green, as in 0, 255, 0. And that's what that light is going to be. All right, green. So I'm going to put that in here, and I'm going to, oops. Okay, I wanted to, you know what, I'm just going to scrub the timeline here. In the timeline, I'm just going to scrub it either earlier or later, and I'm going to have it aiming. I'll do the point of interest. Aiming here and here. All right. So the lights mix just like they would in a computer monitor in real life. So these are light colors. The next thing is this. I'm going to delete both of the lights and I'm going to keep only one light, and I'm going to make it a little bit less red, so more like sepia like that. And P for position, I'm going to put these a little bit farther out. And I think I want to reduce the intensity a little bit. This light is casting shadows. So I'm going to type something, right? And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so that we can see it better. And I'll make it bold so that is, you know, really something. I'm going to make that layer 3D. Do you see how it is immediately being affected by the light? But it's not casting shadows. Look what happens even when I bring it closer to the light, it's not casting shadows. And I know this is in front of the solid for several reasons, because I didn't play around with the Z-axis of the solid. And not only that, but I can actually see things in a different view. For example, I'm going to have a custom view, and I can see that, by the way, that's this drop-down menu. I can go to a custom view, and I can have now my orbit around cursor tool, and I can click and drag so I can look around, and look what happens when I change the Z-axis. Do you see how now this is becoming closer to the camera? So the camera is kind of sort of around here. Neither here nor there. This is getting farther from the solid. So it should be producing shadows, right? So I'm going to go back to here. By default, in After Effects, layers don't produce shadows. All right, just so that you know. And again, listen, this is not a complete lesson in 3D. I am going to do a class, you know, a whole series of videos on 3D. But this is just for the test. In fact, I'm going a little bit beyond because, you know, people have questions and all of that. But this should get you started in 3D. By default, things don't cast shadows in After Effects. You need to tell it to cast shadows. So if you select the text, you expand the layer, right? Expand material options. Look where it says cast shadows is off. Turn it on. And immediately you have shadows. And let me actually go to the light. I'm going to have the shadows not be diffused. And this is what we have. This is where we now can have shadows. And we can do this even better because I can select this layer, right? I can put it really close to the solid so that the shadow is a little bit, more tighter. And now I can rotate this in the y-axis and look how the shadow is just changing with, is coming with. See it? Because then the positioning of the letters is different with respect to the light and the solid, which is receiving the shadow. Alrighty, so there are other things that you should keep in mind, and that is this. Under material options, you can have to cast the shadows. You can also tell it not to accept the lights, like, okay, don't accept lights at all. So now the letters are not taking the color of the light because we told it not to accept lights. So now anything that I do, the light will not affect the text. All right. I can also tell it to only accept some lights, like diffuse, blah, blah, blah. I can tell it specular intensity. Specular stands for mirror. So every time you see the word specular, it has to do with the shininess of a mirror. In other words, very shiny. So I'm going to tell it to, yes, accept lights. And we can have diffuse to be a little bit more. Specular intensity. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. More metally. And specular shininess. That's what I'm talking about. And now we can even keyframe the rotation. So R for rotation, I'm going to keyframe the X rotation like yay. And this is what I have. See how the shininess is just happening, and now it's going like behind the solid, right? Kind of cool. Kind of cool. All right, there are other things that you should know. I'm going to delete those keyframes, and that is this. See where it says Classic 3D? You can click there and you can go to Cinema 4D. Listen, this takes a lot of computer resources. So if my computer or yours crashes, that's okay. Just restart it and go for it. I just need to show you this. Because this is now under Cinema 4D, I have a new element here called Geometry Options, and I can have an extrusion depth. So now my letters, and I'm going to rotate this so that you can see it, my letters have depth. See them right there? I'm going to make this light a little bit more brilliant so you can see it better. Oof, that's a lot. I'll be a little less ridiculous. All right. And you know what? I'm going to tell it not to cast shadows so that you can see this a little bit better. And I'm also going to move the light like yay, the point of interest, so you can see it like yay, and maybe even that. Making sense? This has depth. It has depth. So I'm just saying that wasn't available in the Classic 3D. So I can go in here again and I can go with geometry options and look, I can have extrusion, I can have a bevel. I didn't have that before. And then the bevel depth can change as well. And I can change the bevel properties. So if I go back to rotation and I reset, you should see the bevel in there. Making sense? So if I bring this closer to the camera, you should be able to see it even better. All right? So these are elements that were not available to us before, which are available now. All right, when it comes to 3D, and I'm gonna go ahead and delete this, you can use Illustrator files. Let's say I wanna use the logo, right? And in fact, I want all of these things to come in separate. Let's go ahead and import the logo again. And in fact, I'm going to import, yeah, logo 2 is fine. And I'm going to import it as a composition, layer size, click OK, and double click the composition. We can make all those layers 3D, right? That's the first thing. All the layers are 3D. And yeah, there you go. Not quite sure why those disappeared, but whatever. Layer new light. And I'm going to add just a white light. And yes, I'm going to cast shadows. And there it is, right? I'm going to separate this light. So P for position. And I'm going to bring it back like yay. And I'm going to change the intensity of the light to a little bit more. And there you go. Notice that any of these can give you curvature, can give you segments, but no extrusion. If you are doing extrusion with these, select them all, right-click, create shapes from vector layer. Shapes from vector layer. This is something that we did in an earlier movie. And now that you have these shape layers, now when you go to extrude to geometry options, you can have extrusion depth. All right, this is not something that you had before. So I'm just going to, yep, all of them got the extrusion depth. And if you want to animate all of these together, layer, new, null object. Make the null object 3D, parent everybody, yeah, even the light, why not, to the null, and now start rotating the null. Making sense? So you can go in here and you can say, hey, you know what? I want to see like this side of it. So, let's add another light. Layer, new light, and let's add an ambient light, right? And that ambient light doesn't need to be too bright, but at least something, right? So I'm going to adjust that in here so it's a little bit less, because we want to see that extrusion, and maybe that extrusion is a little much, but it's neither here nor there, right? So here we go. We can keyframe all these guys, move in time, and now we can change this however we want to change. And that, I'm just going to scrub it, but that's a 3D animation. Making sense? If the extrusion is too much, select your layers. Not a big deal. And with all of them selected, you can expand, and then you can, I'm going to maximize this only because it's easier, right? And geometry options, select all of them at the same time like that. And now when you scrub one, you scrub them all. And we can make this a little bit thinner so it doesn't look so ominous. And there you go. You can also add another light. You can add more, whatever it is. This is very taxing to the system. So, it's not like something that you will be able to like preview real time. I'm going to have another light, and there it is. And maybe I want to have it a little bit more away, only so that I can see that that side. That's what I'm talking about. And there you go. Now I can start adding things like specular shininess and even reflections. And all of that is possible because of Cinema 4D. Of course, when it comes to the test, all you really need to know is that you can manipulate now the layers in X, Y, and Z, right? that you can add another camera. We haven't done that, but listen, layer, new camera. That you can extrude things if you go to Cinema 4D, right? So Classic 3D is not going to let you do it. I'm going to keep on rendering this. Classic 3D is not going to let you do it, but Cinema 4D will let you do it. Extrude them, add lights. No, that by default, layers will not cast shadows. You need to tell them to cast shadows. All right? And I think that's it for 3D. So this brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.